So good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Loken, Managing Director of Communications with Groundwork Ohio. I hope that so far what you're hearing today is resonating with you, that you're hearing some things that are meaningful and relevant to your work. If so, please take a moment to hop on your favorite social media channels and tag us in your post at Groundwork Ohio. For the next 45 minutes or so, we are focused on advocacy, journalism, and Ohio's youngest citizens. I'm going to transfer over to this mic to introduce our esteemed panelists. Esteemed, you heard it here. Laura Bischoff is with us from Gannett and the USA Today Network. She is an award-winning journalist who has covered Ohio politics and state government for 2 decades. Named Ohio's Best Investigative Journalist by the Associated Press in 2020, she also led the team that won the 2024 Scripps Howard Award Investigative Reporting for exposing conditions inside Ohio's juvenile prisons. Laura Hancock is also with us today. She covers politics, K-12 schools, higher education, and childcare for Cleveland.com and The Plain Dealer. With more than 20 years of reporting experience, she previously worked in Wyoming and Utah before moving to Ohio in 2017 to launch Capital Letter, a daily policy and politics newsletter. And finally, we're joined by Karen Kassler, Bureau Chief of the State House News Bureau and an award-winning Ohio journalist. She has covered major elections, debates, and statewide issues for decades, producing features for NPR and Marketplace, and appearing regularly on Ohio media programs. A past president of the Ohio Associated Press, an Emmy nominee, she has taught journalism at Capital University and serves as a frequent moderator and commentator on Ohio politics and policy. Let's welcome these journalists to the stage. Ladies, welcome, and thank you for joining us. In my mind, you are absolute Ohio icons in journalism. It's a real honor to spend time with you today, so thank you for being here. And my first question is one that I pose to each of you. What changes have you noticed in State House media coverage in recent years?
Oh, I get to go first. Sure. I think one of the biggest changes is that the State House Press Corps has largely shrunk. And that's really kind of the story of a lot of newsrooms at all levels. Is there are fewer journalists working. There are a lot of stories that we're all trying to cover. Our bureaus have gotten smaller. Our bureau, we cover the State House for Public Radio and Television in Ohio. Our bureau has stayed the same. We are very, very fortunate because other bureaus have shrunk, honestly, and it makes the job harder for all of us, and it certainly makes the job more difficult because we all want to tell you folks what's going on. And if there are fewer of us to do that, then there are things that we miss. There are details that we might not be able to pick up because we can't be everywhere at once. And so that makes things harder. And of course, the political environment, I mean, you can go on about that for a while. The political environment, I've been doing this for 21 years at the State House, has changed dramatically. So those are the two things I bring up.
Laura Hancock?
The decrease in media. I mean, I know at one point the Plain Dealer had, I believe, 6 people in Columbus. Now, as far as the State House, we have OSU, sports reporters, but as far as the State House, there's just 3 of us. And that change probably happened about 15 years ago. So yeah, we are limited in what we can cover. And a lot of it is just kind of chasing the fire of the day. And then you try to get at the larger issues through weekend pieces. There's been consolidation in the media. When I look at, we have in the press room at the State House, we have photos of journalists going back to the 50s. And there were all sorts of newspaper chains that no longer exist. They've been consolidated and some have totally been shuttered completely. An example of that is the Cincinnati Post no longer exists. I think that was probably 20 years ago or so that closed. So yeah, we just seen there's a lot less media, and we are competing with a lot of noise out there. So, like kitty videos on YouTube or political rants or, things like that. So, so it's an environment where we're vying for people's attention with a lot of noise out there.
I will say one thing that's been good, I think, when Laura brings up the composites of all the State House press corps going back many, many years. There's a lot more women. They were mostly all white guys for so many years, and so there's a lot more women. So that's at least one change that I think is positive. The diversity is better than it was.
Moderately so.
Okay.
I would agree with what Laura and Karen said in terms of the reduction of the number of people in the press corps. I think I work for Gannett, which is the Columbus Dispatch, the Cincinnati Enquirer, the Akron Beacon Journal, the Canton Repository, and like 18 other small papers spread across Ohio. But, before Gannett and Gatehouse Media merged, they had separate bureaus. So you had 2 people from the Akron Beacon Journal and 2 people from Gannett, 2 other people from Cincinnati Enquirer, and then the Dispatch had a whole public affairs team of like 6, 7, 8 people. Our bureau now has 3 reporters and a bureau chief, and so it's definitely a reduction in the ranks.
Makes sense. Thank you. Laura Bischoff, I'm going to call on you again. What possible shifts do you anticipate in early childhood issues depending on the outcome of the gubernatorial election?
I don't have a crystal ball, so it's hard to say. I would say that Governor DeWine has been, a champion of children's issues his entire career. Even back when he was in the U.S. Senate, he focused a lot on child safety and all that. And so no matter who comes in, it's not going to be somebody who focuses and makes it as key of an issue as Governor DeWine has.
Agreed. Karen Kassler, for you, many of us here in the room today see trends that take a while to bubble up to policymakers. What is your advice for us about how it's best to maybe communicate with you or other reporters to get things on the radar? For example, when we see a trend, we're concerned about policy implementation, or when we feel like we're not being heard.
I think one of the things I really like to see is any sort of facts, numbers, something that can show me what you're looking at that has you concerned or that is raising that issue for you. Because it's very easy to just think, well, this is happening in my circle and I'm concerned about it. But if you can show me that this is happening widespread, that this is bigger, and why it's something that's on your radar, that can help put it on my radar. And anytime that you can put human faces and real names to things, that's always helpful. I mean, as when Governor DeWine came into office and he started programs like Ohio Rise, being able to talk to family members and to people who could tell you specific stories about how these programs would affect them, or if these programs were lost, how that would affect them, that's really helpful too. I'm really bad at getting back with people too. So having a little patience and reaching out more than once can really help, because we get bombarded with a lot of stuff. I mean, we're following the legislature, we're following the governor's office, Supreme Court. And I'm saying that, I think, for all 3 of us. And so just because we didn't respond the first time doesn't mean we're not interested. It's just sometimes we're overwhelmed. And you can always circle back with us, at least with me.
Yep, makes sense. Be bold. Be bold.
I would also echo Karen's call for, helping us find people who are affected by the issue that you're talking about. Having real people really humanizes stories, and it makes them much more powerful, and it provides an opportunity for what we call art, which means photos and video, which is essential for anything online.
And we can always work with people on preserving privacy and making sure that important details are not put out there. But having those real people, those real stories, when parents come forward and talk about how things affect their kids, these are just invaluable pieces of storytelling. And, you know, we in the media do storytelling. I know that's gotten a bad rap lately because that doesn't mean we're telling things that are not true. We are telling stories because stories get people more interested than just putting out facts and just explaining this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Stories really bring people in and get people engaged and interested in what we're trying to tell them about.
Agree. Anything to add to that, Laura H?
For me, I think contacting by email is always best, very practical. Sometimes people try to contact me by like Facebook, and you know how you have like different tranches of messages. I mean, I might not get that for 6 months because I'm not looking at random people messaging me. So definitely, I would say email's best. And yeah, and just, you know, kind of realize that we're pretty busy, so we might not be able to get back to you for a while, and maybe email again. So thanks.
And you may have a really good story and a really good story idea, but and we would love to do it, but it falls down on our list of priorities. We have other stuff, so don't take it personally if we don't do your story.
That's helpful. Let's stay on that Facebook topic for just a second. Laura Hancock, do you pay attention to social media platforms? And if so, which ones are you on? As we know you're on Facebook. We'll find you there. We won't message you there. But what, you know, where else do you have a presence? Is that connected to the work that you're doing? What kinds of things are catching your attention?
I'm on X. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Blue Sky, that new one, Threads. I will say I should be spending more time paying attention to the Twitter, you know, the X, that kind of thing. But I've noticed just like with the environment right now where it's just people screaming at each other, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are like this too. I just mentally can't take it. So I feel like sometimes I just write my, like, you know, promote my story, and it's almost like, you know, lobbing a grenade, because then everybody's going to comment and everybody's going to have a smart aleck thing to say, and you know. And so sometimes I just like do it and then I get off. I know I shouldn't. I know I should be more paying attention. But yeah, but we do, you know, I will say though, I have found people through social media. You know, people say, well, that's not true with my disability, or, you know, whatever. And then I'm like, okay, then I just message them, you know, so I can connect with them and then do a story and include them. So that's always a great way to connect with people, average people, because a lot of times we tend to get overly dependent on like a spokesperson for an organization type of deal. And so it's nice to get normal people. So yeah, and that's kind of another thing when you talk about how have our jobs changed in the last like 25 years or so. Before, we used to have a deadline, you know, if it was a morning paper, your deadline would be maybe 6 p.m. Now the deadline is 10 minutes ago because it needs to be online. And not only are you writing stories all day, but you're now marketing your own stories through doing social media. So that's kind of just like another responsibility. Sometimes I've had to shoot video for stories, you know, it's just like we all have a lot more, you know, stuff kind of globbed onto us now.
You know, everything that Laura Hancock says is true, but I want to just put in a plug. It's still the best job in the whole wide world. Like, it sounds like we're complaining, oh, we got so much to do. I mean, everybody's got a lot to do, right? But I love my job. I am paid to be curious, and I get to explore all kinds of different issues and meet really interesting people, and I love it. And even though the speed of the treadmill may have been turned up on us in recent years, it's still a great place to have a career.
I completely agree. When I got hired in this job, I said it was my dream job, and I still believe it, even after everything that's been happening over the last 21 years. But I will also echo what Laura said about X. I mean, Twitter used to be a really great place to get information, especially breaking news. You could find the journalists because they were clearly marked, and you could trust these certain sources to tell you what's going on. Now it's just, you know, unverified sources and AI slop and all of this stuff that's just very frustrating. I follow certain journalists like these two and other people who are in the State House Press Corps, other journalists that I know because I can trust them. But even journalists sometimes get caught resharing something that is not the full story or was completely wrong. And it's really frustrating. But that's part of what social media has become, I think, for all of us. And it's unfortunate, because where else can we reach you folks? How can you reach us? And how can we build that trust so that when we tell you something is true, you believe it, and when you come to us and say this is happening, we believe it?
Great segue to this next question. So earlier this morning, before you joined us, Robert Blizzard shared Gallup polling that shows trust in media news is at an all-time low across partisanship. I'd love to hear, what do you think is the most important root cause of this historic low trust? And what comes to mind for me is political polarization, perceived media bias that may not be there, economic incentives like clicks and views, and then just lots of misinformation, like the example that you just gave. What can you share about that?
Those trend lines are really concerning. I would say that people have they're kind of confused about what I do as a beat reporter versus what like Rachel Maddow does as a entertainment online cable personality. And there's kind of like a blurring of those lines. People don't understand how we do our jobs differently. And I think it's probably on us to better explain that there are, there's different, it's almost like saying all sports are the same, and you're putting like world wrestling in with professional golf. Like we're totally different, even though we're all media. It's different, and I think we could do a better job of explaining that, for one thing.
If Ralph Lauren told you to never wear Tommy Hilfiger because Ralph Lauren is the true American designer and Tommy Hilfiger is un-American, would you believe that? If anything, it'd make you want to buy more of the opposite, right? So when organizations such as Fox News tell you that they're fair and balanced, the true media, and the rest of the media has a bias, they're not the real media, don't buy it, it's marketing. They're doing it to keep themselves in business, to keep high audience numbers so they can sell ads for a lot of money. I think that the Fox Newsization of America has kind of made people skeptical of regular reporters. I also think there's a difference between like a national reporter and a local reporter. I don't get paid tons of money. I don't have like a town car driving me places. I'm a normal person. And so, and I think at the national level, I've written stories about small businesses, and, I've done stuff, that's more community journalism. I'm not, I have also done stories that are very critical also, but it's just very different than kind of what you're seeing on the national scene as well. And kind of like, supporting a local coffee shop, support your local news.
I always like to remind people that we are your neighbors. We live in your community. We shop at the grocery store. We go to church. We do all of the things that you out there do. We are not the enemy. We are part of the community. And I think that's really important, that local reporters, as stories go national and certain details are taken out of local reporters' stories in favor of the national coverage, I think some of that is lost, that people forget that we are part of the community, just like all of you are part of the community. I will also say that I do news for NPR and PBS stations. So there's been a real impact on our stations from the polarization of what's been happening, and also the narratives that you've heard from Fox News and even more extreme outlets. The federal funding that we lost was real, and the impact is going to be seen over time, especially in small rural stations. Those are the ones that are going to close down, and that really hurts for young children and families that are at home trying to help their kids learn before they go to school, programs that were specifically targeted toward early childhood education. They're going to be lost when local stations, small local rural stations, don't have the money to continue to broadcast. So there is a real impact of all this that we're starting to feel, and we don't know where it's going to go.
Add to that?
No, I was just going to say that, we are members of the community, and I've lived in the Columbus area for almost 25 years now. And I mean, Karen and I, we're regular blood donors. You could end up getting a pint from us.
That's great to know. Just a quick follow-up on that. Is there anything that we can do as advocates in our work with you to help rebuild that trust?
Subscribe to your local newspaper.
Yeah.
Or join your local public media station. But I guess, telling people, sharing our work. I know we've just been saying that it's hard to trust social media anymore. But if there's something that you see that a reporter did that you like, that you feel tells a really good story, try to share it and get more clicks for that reporter, because that's what helps get our work out there. I mean, like Laura was saying, that we have to kind of market ourselves. And so the more people that read our stories, not only is that what we want, because we're not doing this to just put it out there in the void. We want people to see what we write. We want people to know this information. So if you share it with your trusted friends and family, that can help, I think, too.
I think as far as your advocacy, a lot of you guys have a lot of credibility coming with you, considering you work in the childcare space. And this is a thing that most families have to deal with, childcare. And so in a lot of ways, I think that really is helpful, and that really is something you have going for you. So if there is an issue, I think I would listen to you guys more than, I don't know, some random person. Because I get solicitations for stories all the time. Coming from a professional in childcare would just mean a lot more.
That's great. So all three of you work for major media outlets. Can you talk a little bit about the kinds of stories you're interested in covering versus maybe smaller, more local media outlets might go after?
Well, I like to do regular daily stories and short-term enterprise, but mostly I really enjoy doing longer-term projects. We did a project that looked at conditions of confinement in the youth prisons in Ohio and the juvenile detention centers. And that led to the DeWine administration saying that they would close the youth prisons and shift to smaller, local, closer to home facilities for these teenagers who, they've done really bad things, in large part because they've had very traumatic lives. So I was really gratified to do that story. Another project that I did that published in March, and it has to do with kids as well, was on Ohio's vicious dog laws and how they fail victims. And children are disproportionately represented in that. And that now there's a bill pending in the legislature to beef up the vicious dog laws. And then when I was at Dayton Daily News, I did a story on child marriage laws in Ohio, and they changed the law. So we can have I think we have an impact when we invest in investigative journalism.
I think sometimes if you see a trend going on nationally and you think, oh, wow, this has been going on in Ohio for a while too, that's always something that we tend to be interested in. If you let us know, that this national thing that they're dealing with in Congress, this is actually going on in Ohio and this is what it looks like, that's always something that we're interested in. And yeah, we do investigative. We do what we call dailies, which is just kind of more of a shorter story where you quote a handful of people. And then what we call enterprise, which is you take a story idea and you pursue it. And, you might have an idea this isn't how I feel, but there's too much regulation in the step up to quality. This is a belief about a lot of people in the legislature. So then, I would call people and then see where the story takes me. Because a lot of times I start off with a thesis and then, it's No, the reality is nowhere close to that. But that, that's like an enterprise story. So yeah, we just kind of, we have different stories that we pursue. Mhm.
And what we're doing at State House News Bureau, it's me and my two colleagues, Joe Ingalls and Sarah Donaldson, and then we have a videographer and director of our TV show. So we produce daily radio spots of about 45 seconds, sometimes longer features that can go 4 minutes. And then we have a weekly TV show called The State of Ohio, which goes for half an hour. And then we have a podcast. And we also do things like this and on WOSU and WVXU and WCPN in Cleveland and, all that. So we're looking for statewide stuff as opposed to local stuff. So things that really show, and that can be really tough because this is a state that has urban areas, rural areas, suburban areas. It can be really difficult to cover issues and make people in all of those different areas aware and care about these things. So we kind of have a unique mission in terms of making sure that what we put together will have interest to everybody. But also everything that we do is tied to our overall mission of covering the government, state government, legislature, governor, Supreme Court, state agencies, and elections. So that's we're always on the lookout for things like that. The budget has given us obviously a lot to write about because there's so much in the budget that affects so many people. But then we're also seeing some other things, redistricting happening now. There were a couple of property tax bills that keep moving forward, and trying to explain those in 45 seconds is a lot of fun. So that's what we're looking for.
Yep. We touched on this briefly, but I really want to hear and understand more. Can you describe an ideal source and what you're looking for in evaluating their information?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, I have a lot of sources who I've known for a super long time, and over that period of time, I've built trust, and I understand what they know, what they're in a position to know. Sometimes I'll get like anonymous tips from encrypted emails or messages, and that's always a little dicey. And so, I would never just run a story based on something from that person, but sometimes it provides a roadmap for records that I might want to request and questions I might want to ask, and then it might pan out, and the tipster might reach out to me again, and again, it's like a little nugget of information to have me go pursue. So it's kind of like the whole gamut of somebody who I've known for a long time and who I trust because I know what they know, and then also like just something just sort of thrown over the transom to me.
Yeah. Random breadcrumbs. Yeah.
There's a saying in journalism, if your grandma says she loves you, check it out. So if you write us or call us or whatever, and we're talking to you and you're like, okay, how can I verify that? Who do I call? Don't take it personally. It's just that there have been a lot of famous stories of reporters going wayward. And so we need to bring receipts when we do our stories. So that's just something to be expected.
Yeah, we're a really skeptical bunch because of this. I mean, we are trying to make sure that what we put out there is the most trustworthy and accurate information that we can find. And so a great source is somebody who comes with a way to check them out and is not offended by us asking, hey, where did this come from, so that I can independently verify it. And just anybody who's got information that can help me understand stories better, because there's a lot of complex stuff that takes a while to really get through, like property taxes right now, trying to write about or school funding or some of these other things that are just difficult subjects to understand. If somebody has the time and the expertise to explain it in English to me, like I'm 5, that really helps me as I start working up the curve of trying to understand this stuff.
We love getting calls like that from a journalist who wants us to help break down something perhaps in the budget that's related to early childhood that they don't understand. There may never become a story out of that conversation, but it's time well spent. And to your point about just building trust.
Yeah, I mean, the budgets run like 5,000-6,000 pages, and as you all know, just one little line can be completely have a huge impact. And so we often rely on people who know their business in this little piece, these couple pages of the budget, to help us out and help explain things.
Yeah, that's helpful. Can you share some examples of when a children's advocate helped you illuminate an issue?
My colleague Joe Ingles did a story just a couple of weeks. Well, I guess what is it? July. Okay, so a couple months ago, I guess. Time is a weird construct. About how difficult it has been to find childcare for medically fragile children in Ohio. And this is just a really important issue for those families who are trying to work, who are trying to, be out there and have careers and support their kids and everything. And so she ended up working with some folks who led her down to a facility in Kentucky where she could see that in action, and she could talk to some parents about how it's worked for them to have their children in this place where they could trust that they were being cared for properly. And it's just not as available in Ohio as it is there. And so I think having that working relationship that Joe developed, where she was able to go down there, talk to some parents, talk to the operators of this facility and say, this is what Ohio is looking at. This is what could happen in Ohio. I think that was a great story. And like we've all said, I think having the visuals, having the real people with their faces and names is just so important to explaining to people what these issues really mean.
I have an example. And when we were working on the youth prison project, it started out, I was just focused a little bit on the problems at Indian River Juvenile Correctional Facility in Massillon, which has just had huge problems staffing and a lot of violence, and like the kids took over the library and building and live streamed what looked a lot like a riot, although the Department of Youth Services said it was a disruption. And that led the editors to say, hey, we should really take a deeper look at everything that's going on in the youth detention system in Ohio. And I didn't know a lot about juvenile law. And so I talked to the Children's Law Center of it serves Ohio and Kentucky, and the lawyers there had like a long Zoom call with me to help just like educate me on what the law is, how the detention system works, where the pitfalls, et cetera. And that was a background discussion, and it was super helpful.
Great. Laura Hancock, any examples?
Not at the top of my head, although when there is something kind of lofty going on policy-wise at the state or federal level, you guys are always super helpful because you can kind of illustrate what it looks like on the ground. If, say, Governor DeWine has got, child care credit program is a good example where he's trying to capture low-income people, but people who make too much money to qualify for publicly funded daycare. Finding families or providers who serve that population, that helps to show how it works. And that it's not just a politician saying, oh, the sky is falling, there's this terrible problem, but we can actually say, oh, yeah, and then here's some people who deal with that.
And not to completely suck up to you folks, but when there was the whole discussion about investing in early childhood education, Groundwork did some really great work in explaining what that looked like, what that meant, the whole idea of spending money when kids are really, really little and how it affects their brain development and things like that. I remember a media packet that just really explained a lot of this. And that was super helpful because I'm not sure that all of us really understood what the research was saying about early childhood education and why the money invested was so critical. So it's that kind of explanation that has, some real data behind it that can be really, really helpful to us as we're trying to talk about this issue with lawmakers and the governor and things like that.
That's super helpful to know. Great feedback. Do we have any questions from members of the audience? Can we get someone to run a mic?
This is just a quick follow-up to your point you just made. How long is data relevant? So let's say, we come to you with a story, we have a person who embodies the issue, and then we also want to show you like this data supports it.
Oh, I mean, the fresher the data, the better.
But I mean, like if it's a year old, is it not?
Old, I think, is still
fresh
pretty
too?
good. You could still use that in a story, but sometimes people will point to studies that are like, 5 years old. Or also, I would say a lot of data that comes from COVID times is kind of all whacked, just in general.
But I mean, the data that we get from the state lags at least a year behind in a lot of areas. So a year that's good.
I'm going to be an audience member because our groundwork team is learning with you, but many of the conversations we've had today have been on the local impact of the federal shutdown. So we have Head Start programs in this association represented here, almost 3,000 kids, families on the line as of November 1, and then about 180,000 families that utilize WIC, moms, infants, and children. Are those stories that you're covering now, and how can we be helpful in providing some information?
There is a press conference 22 minutes in right now at the State House about, it's Democrats talking about the real impacts of the shutdown on the WIC population, on SNAP population. So that's been something that I think we've had a little bit of trouble getting real numbers on, because nobody knows what's going to happen with this thing. And, like the food banks have been saying, we're still operating. If people need us, please come to us. They don't want to start any sort of panic or concerns. So it's been difficult to really get a sense of how big this could be, because we don't know where this is going. I mean, when we asked DeWine early on about what do you expect? You've been in Congress, you've seen federal shutdowns before, and he said, expect the unexpected, which is exactly what we don't want to hear, but it's a real answer, I guess.
So this isn't so much a question, but a piggyback off of what you're talking about. So our families over in the Alliance area are already getting really nervous about the November 1st deadline. So speaking with them, they're concerned about how are we going to feed our families. For those who don't know the Alliance community, 100% of the kids in our preschool and kindergarten classrooms receive free meals because the poverty rate is just that high. And so we're just trying to figure out, how do we feed these families? And so just because I know there's a lot of advocates in this room, one of the things we're doing, I know it's short term, but it's something, we are investing because there's a lot of trunk or treats going on right now. Instead of buying candy, we are buying ramen noodles and macaroni and cheese. And we're giving them to families because it's a way we can make sure they have a meal. And it's a way we can do it with dignity because they're not having to ask for it. So just throwing that out there.
Oh, I would totally take a story on that.
Same, absolutely. Oh, that's great stuff. Oh, wow.
I have my
What
card.
you're doing. That's terrific.
So, but yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. So mac and cheese and ramen, it's going to feed some families.
Amazing. Thank you. We have time for another question.
Hello, I'm Amy Heiner from the Richland County Foundation Women's Fund. So I just have a small story and then a question to go with that. So our local news media, it's called Richland Source, Ashland Source, and Knox Pages, has recently done a series of solutions journalism, and it's called It Takes a Village, and it's all about childcare. And this is their biggest project they've ever done with their entire newsroom. So their sports writers are writing about it and different things like that. And so they raised money for it. Private philanthropy businesses have put in money to go towards this series. And so we are asking the question, do you have any ideas for us of how, because it started conversations in our community, but how can we then now take this from our little regional level to make more of an impact on state and federal level?
I think there's a whole other half of our media operation that does that stuff. I mean, I do more of the day-to-day stuff, but it's really interesting. That whole idea of solutions journalism is really a great concept, because it kind of doesn't focus on the people shouting at each other, but tries to come up with solutions and ways out of this. So I wish I had an answer for you. I'm sorry. It's a great it's great what you're doing. I mean, the idea that you've got the entire team kind of focusing on this issue is really interesting. And I guess maybe finding a media partner that would be able, and I know that's tough in the Mansfield area, but if there's the opportunity to do a town hall or some sort of an event where you can bring people together to talk about this, maybe that's a next step. I don't know.
I've been reading those articles and they're really excellent. I think one way you could elevate it is to take it to some of the national associations, like the National Association for the Education of Young Children or the National Association for Family Childcare, because they're always looking for real life on the ground stories. And their advocacy is done across the country. So I think those real life stories, they'd be really excited to be able to elevate those.
We can take one last question for our journalists.
Good afternoon. My name is Kate. I work with United Way. We are part of the Success by Third Grade Collective Impact Movement. And so my question for you is, how do we, in your 45 seconds of trying to educate folks, how do we help bolster that information? Because it's really hard, I think, to cut through the noise. I support Columbus City Schools. You know, we're having a $50 million cut ahead of us. And so just trying to think of how do we help families understand what's the bottom line, how do they, and not so we have this helpless space if we can't do anything. It needs to be solutions focused. But how do we help support that? Because I hear that through when I listen to you, but how do I help amplify that?
This to me. It's, you know, that I think that's been part of what we in journalism have struggled with, the idea of covering day-to-day news. We tell you what happened, but it's not our role to tell you how to fix it. And that's kind of where longer conversations, where we have podcasts and you know, conversations that can go bigger than that. I don't have, once again, I don't have a good answer, and it's frustrating because I wish I did, and I hate the idea of just throwing bad news out there, and then you come to me going, well, how can we fix it? I don't know. If I had ideas, I'd run for office. You know, I don't know.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Laura, Karen, Laura, thank you for a thoughtful and candid discussion and for the important work that each of you does every day to help Ohioans understand these important issues facing our state, shaping our state. Today's conversation really reminds us that advocacy and journalism share a common purpose: uncovering truth, elevating voices, and driving change that makes life better for Ohio's children and families. And let's try to carry that spirit into the rest of our time together today.